A warm welcome to our presentation entitled The Leap into Digital Learning for ESD and Quality Education, Zimbabwean Experience. The presentation is given by Crispen Dirwai and Caroline Chirume. Join us on our journey as we share our experiences of digital learning during the COVID era. In a presentation entitled Digital Education, Information and Communication Technology, and Education for Sustainable Development, Professor Michael Ricard and Professor Daniel Burgos made the following statement. Digital education and ICTs are an essential component of the implementation of ECD, both in terms of strategic innovation, pedagogy renewal, teacher training, inclusive school development, and partnership with other actors of sustainable development. The COVID-19 pandemic saw an urgent call for a move into digital education in Zimbabwe, and most institutions were not yet ready for this new mode of teaching and learning. At a micro scale, schools, mostly the urban and elite, colleges and universities embarked on online teaching using various platforms such as social media, mainly WhatsApp, email, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and Class 123. At a macro or national scale, the government with partners embarked on the use of radio lessons and in addition encouraged the use of WhatsApp. Different institutions employed different online teaching and learning pedagogies. The University of Zimbabwe's Department of Science, Mathematics, Design, Technology Education has used blended online and face-to-face since 2010 under the Open Distance e-learning platform, ODEL. In the ODEL mode, course materials, tests, and assignments are sent online, mainly through email to students at the beginning of each semester. All laboratory work in the ODEL online mode are done face-to-face at 3 associate teacher education colleges using a face-to-face mode, thereby blending digital and face-to-face. Institutions that used Microsoft Teams and Zoom and Class 123 had the option of seeing their participants online, and learners also had the option to continue working offline with downloaded recorded materials and posted texts. To cater for disadvantaged learners who could not access Zoom and WhatsApp, the Government of Zimbabwe, through the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, together with partners who were the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, ZBC, and UNICEF, embarked on radio sessions covering lessons and concepts from ECD to grade 7. At the beginning of each lesson, the facilitator gave the lesson objectives and advised the learners and parents or guardians of the learning objectives. Also brought to the learners and parents' attention were the objects or media needed, such as recording devices to archive the lesson for future reference and for revision purposes, and counts for mathematics concepts. For ECD, song and play were encouraged. The songs and games were from a local context, although teacher bias could not be ruled out, as what could be local in one region of Zimbabwe might not be familiar in another. Learners were given written work online, and this varied by ICT mode used. Assessment 2 was a challenge, as some teachers who were using the WhatsApp platform could not have access to mark the work that children were doing, as compared to their counterparts who were using Microsoft Teams and Classroom 123, who marked children's work online using the formats offered on those learning platforms. Where the teacher did not have access to the completed work, answers from the children's work were given to parents to assist in the marking process before the start of a new lesson. Teachers who relied on this mode of assessment and marking claimed that it was not easy to ascertain whether or not the learners actually did the written work on their own, and the only way to verify this was to do a physical check once schools open for face-to-face teaching and learning. The new mode of online learning had its own share of challenges. Learners from poor backgrounds could not afford the data bundles, while others could not access the smartphones and other ICT-related gadgets needed, and so they were left behind. One teacher noted that out of a class of 56, only 19 children were participating, and this was a familiar trend in many schools. Some student representatives from one tertiary institution even approached the courts to challenge online teaching, as shown in the newspaper headline. Students challenge exclusionary university e-learning. Students from poor and rural backgrounds should not be unfairly discriminated. In some households, only one functional smartphone had to be shared amongst the children and their parents. During the COVID-19 lockdown period, parents too were supposed to do their work online, and this created tensions as parents and children struggled to share one gadget for online services. Those fortunate ECD learners who had access to online learning platforms through their parents' smartphones and laptops also had challenges with ICT-related skills as they failed to type their work on the platforms. Although WhatsApp is commonly used by most people in Zimbabwe, some parents and teachers complained that they did not receive basic training on the use of WhatsApp as an online teaching and learning platform. In a similar manner, Google Classroom, Teams, and Zoom were not familiar platforms for both teachers and parents, and so a lack of basic training affected digital learning. What we found was that both teachers and parents had to rely on downloading videos from YouTube in order to understand better how the new mode of learning was to function. Whilst the radio lesson was a noble intervention by government and partners, just as with the social media platform which were not accessible, the radio lessons had their own share of challenges too. Not all children and not all homesteads, especially in rural areas, had access to radios. Moreover, as one teacher noted, that listening to radio in this manner seems to be old-fashioned, as today's children want to listen to music and to watch videos, and so at times the radio lesson would go on broadcasting to empty lounges as children would be playing outside. The other challenge noted by teachers that were interviewed for this presentation was that primary school children do have a limited listening span, and for them to be passively glued to a radio without any action being observed for a long time was a problem, especially once the novelty had worn away. Teachers working online with their classes were challenged to approach classroom discipline differently and to consider the very real daily intrusion into the learner's social dynamics. Continuing with one final example of challenges experienced, one lecturer, whom we shall call Lecturer C, at a private college summed up their online experience in an interview as follows. During this COVID-19 lockdown period, 2020, we have been using Google Classroom and Google Meet. All our students are able to access lectures that way at some point. However, we have two who could not afford the data bundles. We resorted to posting PowerPoint presentations on email and audio explanations on the WhatsApp platform for them to access. Some students indicated that they were not always able to go live for the tabled lectures, but could download and generally go through class sessions later. Still, to cut down on length of discussions for tabled Google Meet sessions, we encourage responses and discussions during and after tabled lectures. Time management was another challenge raised by students because of constraints from home commitments. Slow network also affected online teaching and learning. But overall, the students said they were able to keep up one way or another. Digital technologies generate a great deal of data that is collected, stored, and processed by a multitude of actors to implement new pedagogies that help rethink ESD. Firstly, for the benefit of learners who can thus access specific learning paths. In the case of Zimbabwe, urban and rural primary school learners could access radio lessons. Elite and urban learning institutions could access WhatsApp, Class 123, Microsoft Teams, and Google Classroom. Secondly, for teachers who have the opportunity to develop new pedagogies and new resources. Teachers reflected on the use of locally based teaching objects, folklores, games, songs, and other media, an opportunity that was brought about by digital learning. With the need to keep learners engaged, teachers were also challenged to think outside the box, outside the limitations of the four walls of their classrooms. Thirdly, for education researchers who will better understand the ESD and be able to modify practices. Research opportunities were opened up especially in the area of assessment, as the majority of teachers interviewed realized the need to train teachers and parents on the new learning platform. In the final two slides, we're going to be focusing on 6 key discussion questions. Question number 1. Are all digital platforms beneficial? We concluded all digital platforms, including traditional email, are beneficial. Bearing in mind the case of the University of Zimbabwe's ODL mode, we noted the need for blending digital with face-to-face. Question number 2. What are the challenges involved in online learning? Equipment availability. Lack of smartphones, laptops, radios. Expensive data bundles and poor network connectivity are some of the primary challenges. Secondary challenges include lack of software technical know-how, since teachers, parents, and children were not trained in using ICT for teaching learning purposes. The learners' lack of typing skills, thus making it difficult to distinguish learners' work from that done by parents on behalf of their children, was yet another challenge noted. Question number 3. Is online learning effective? From the open distance e-learning case study, it is effective, as the program has channeled out many graduates since its inception in 2010, and there are cases of some ODEL graduates who have been accepted for postgrad programs in Europe and other African countries. But online learning in the case of ODEL still blends with face-to-face. Online learning purely on its own in the Zimbabwean context is ineffective, given the challenges for the majority, as it is inclined towards benefiting the elite. Question number 4. Where pedagogy meets technology, how do we bridge the digital divide? For primary challenges mentioned earlier, smartphones and other ICT gadgets can be subsidized so that they are accessible to the majority of learners, teachers, and parents. For secondary challenges, teachers, parents, and learners need to be trained or capacity enhanced in digital learning platforms. Researchers and writers might come up with pamphlets, books, or even brochures and television and radio programs on the use of digital learning platforms so as to conscientize the population. Question number 5. How to move from digital tools and new technologies to the desired changes and social transformation specific to ESD. A new face to social media might help when the general population is encouraged to use the social networking system for educational purposes. Linked to social media is training in online safety, since parents and children now do most of their work online. Moreover, there is need to blend digital with limited face-to-face for a start. Final question. How will the institutions that are today the guarantors of knowledge and its diffusion integrate the more frequent use of new technologies? In this case, we say there is still need to blend limited face-to-face with digital. We acknowledge that change is inevitable, and institutions in the Zimbabwe context should speak into a change that embraces and influences ESD. These institutions play a pivotal role in bringing together stakeholders from across the board to contribute towards making this transition possible.